everyone, I welcome you all to module 23rd of the course of UN SDGs. In this we are going to cover SDG 15, life on land. So some facts and figures. 2 billion hectares of land on earth are degraded, affecting some 3.2 billion people, driving species to extinction and intensifying climate change. So if you see this huge swath of land, like this is an incomprehensible, like a swath of land, on the face of earth, is degraded by, like some activity, some like maybe anthropogenic activity or something, which in turn is affecting 3.2 billion people, because earth we need for several reasons. First of all, to grow our food, right? Then to build our houses, habitation, right? And earth is actually essential for setting up any like infrastructure project, any new like a work like roads or factories, like all of those things, right? We need land for schools, colleges, hospitals, all of those things. So all of our requirements, if you see, are based on a piece of land, like somewhere on which like we build our houses and we comfortably like make our living, right? So if this land is not available, where are we going to grow our like crops, where are we going to grow our like a food, and all of those challenges actually like arise. So overall, what is the goal over here? To sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. So if you see, there are a few like major like factors inside. Combat desertification. What is desertification? Desertification is a process in which normal fertile land, like you can see this, like a forested, like a place. Well, this forest, like a place is possible in a land where there is, like a plenty of water, organic material, humus, all of those things, which makes, like this land fertile, to grow, like these many like trees and vegetation, etc. Right? When it loses, like those properties, okay, and starts moving towards, like a kind of an hostile, like a state of, like a condition which is not supportive for sustaining, like these trees or like any kind of vegetation. It starts becoming slowly like like a dead and more like a sand. Okay, if the that humus content, that moisture content starts degrading, if the salinity starts in like a changing, if there is like acidification and all of those like a processes or maybe chemicals or some other pollutants, right, it starts losing like slowly it's that capacity, that property. Okay, that is desertification. Okay, so desertification is that process in which like it slowly deserts like a form, like the area of the desert increases, right? That's desertification. Okay, because a desert is a place, like a piece of land which is of very little use. Well, there are like some uses for that, like also, but since there is a need to grow food, live, and like make other like uses, plus like a plant like a trees and have forest which will in turn give us like a oxygen supply and all of those things. Okay, so we need land for that, right? So we cannot allow desertification to extend and increase its like a catchment, right? So that is the point, first point. Then second point, halt and reverse land degradation. So what is land degradation? Okay, another like a process in which the land actually, if it is not getting desertified, but still it is losing its quality, right? And it's degrading because soil is meant for several purposes which I just mentioned. Okay, if the soil is not fit enough, is not good enough to sustain life and do all of those things, that's a degradation. For example, if there are like a toxic effluents discharged in a piece of land, right? So that actually kills the like living forms, plus it makes the whole like a soil and its surrounding areas like a very toxic, right? For human habitation also it becomes like inhabitable, right? And all of those things, right? So that's degradation. Halt biodiversity loss. Okay, so biodiversity, if you see like this like a picture, I'm sure like there is no doubt in this that this kind of a place where there is like plenty of trees, vegetation, like a water and all of these things, it harbors more number of like flora and fauna, all sorts of species of different animals, microbes, and like reptiles and like birds, all of them, because it's an interdependent system. If you see this sketch, okay, this land is supporting this tree, which in turn is supporting like some species of life. Okay, so it's an interdependent system. Okay, so if this comes, rest of the species will also automatically start like a flourishing, coming and living over there, making it as their like a habitat, right? So it's an interdependent system which like nourishes this biodiversity factor, right? So we have to prevent like this loss of biodiversity by maintaining these forests and the extent of these forests. Okay, so gradually if you see there are like some reports which suggest even in the like a southern like a American continent, this whole like a swath which is like a Amazon forest, okay, is gradually like a decreasing, right? There is a huge afforestation, like a cutting off like a trees, like a infrastructure projects. There are highways passing through the like a these like this forest, right? New town settlements, they are coming up, they are expanding their like a periphery slowly, right? So all of those things, if you see, are the causes of reduction in the forest footprint, which in turn will kind of become region for the biodiversity loss, right? So all of these things are actually like being discussed under like this SDG 15. That's why we are discussing it here. Well, why is it needed? Forests cover nearly 31% of our planet's land area. 31%. Okay, close to 33. You may call it like close to one third. From the air we breathe, to the water we drink, to the food we eat, forest like give us. Well, how do they give water, like you may ask? Because forest is just like a vegetation, right? And water is stored in the rivers or ponds and lakes, etc. But if you see, whenever there is a like like a rain, okay, so there is a like a huge rain and water actually drops down to the surface, right? And it goes to the runoff and in the rivers, and it just like runs off. Okay, but the water which we consume from the groundwater, actually for that you need this like a recharge to this like a ground surface. How that happens, how the forests actually help, they retain this water in their roots, because here they have like these thick like roots, spread roots, holding moisture, holding like a like a water, holding like nutrients, this soil and all of it. So there is a huge concentration of water in these roots, and since forests are covering the huge surface of the land, there is a huge like amount of water retained in the roots of like these like trees. Slowly and gradually this water actually keeps moving here and there depending upon the like a water table and the water pressure in the soil, right? And that actually helps recharging those aquifers which are running underground, and these are the aquifers from which we are drawing water and we are making use, right? So this is how actually forests, trees actually help in giving us water, also potable water, right? Fresh water. If you visit mountains like in hill areas, you can see like even in the like an off like a rainy seasons, you can see like there is like a water stream flowing, and like maybe from a root of a tree, there is a bamboo kind of structure kept, and there is like a fresh water like a falling and all of that. That is possible because of this forest which is like there at the top of like this land, and which is holding a lot of water in its like a root systems. Okay, so this is how this system works. Forests are home to more than 80% of all terrestrial species of animals, plants and insects. So you see, if forests are getting lost, like all of this 80% of all sorts of like species will be directly threatened, their existence is going to get threatened, right? However, biodiversity is declining faster than at any other time in human history. Yeah, well, it is all declining if we see in a sense, biodiversity loss is also happening, forest cover is also reducing, like pollution is increasing. So all of those negativity factors are actually present, as of like now. But we need to revise like this situation and bring it to its original like a condition. Globally, the 1/5 of the Earth's land area, more than 2 billion hectares, are degraded. So 1/5, 20%, that is around 2 billion hectares. This fact, like what we saw. An area nearly the size of India, as big as like our country and the Russian Federation combined. That's a huge, on the world map. If you see both of these, like spheres, in one side India is here, and then Russia is at top, like spreading, from Europe, till this, like a portion. It's a huge swath of land, right? Compared to like North America and South America over here, and Africa, coming down over here, and this part, like Middle East, etc. So these two countries, Russia and India, that much of land, and almost 20%, that 2 billion hectares we are talking about. Land degradation is undermining the well-being of some 3.2 billion people, driving species to extinction and intensifying climate change. Biodiversity and the ecosystem services it underpins can also be the basis for climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction strategies, as they can deliver benefits that will increase the resilience of people to the impacts of climate change. What does loss of forests mean? Lost forests mean the disappearance of livelihoods in rural communities, increased carbon emissions, diminished biodiversity, and the degradation of land. So if you see, disappearance of livelihood in rural communities, because like a rural like a communities, they are directly and in a greater like extent dependent on the forests, right? So it's a direct impacting thing for these societies, the places, the people who are dependent on these. Increased carbon emissions, diminished biodiversity, and degradation of land. While forest loss remains high, 2020 data shows that the proportion of forest in protected areas and under long-term management plans increased or remained stable at the global level and in most regions of the world. Okay, so there is some hope that like it has at least remained at the similar level. Even if there is some loss in some place, but there is new like a forest or new plantation coming at some other place. So overall, like balanced. An irreversible effect of human activity on the environment is species extinction. Yeah, you may have like known that bird, like a dodo. Okay, so this bird actually dodo, met extinction, because of like some, like when I think long back, I think a few hundred years back, when Europeans, like arrived in the like Aboriginal Australia. Right, so that time, like it was a kind of like a new finding, for these people, this bird dodo, and this used to be unsuspecting, very kind of like a bird, okay, and it was kind of like hunted by these Europeans, like a huge, like a numbers, to its extinction. That they hunted it so much, that this whole species actually got, like extinct. So you see, there is a direct, like impact of, like a group of, like a people, or a community of people, impacting, like a certain species, like at certain place, right? And this is not just one example. There are many other, examples from, parts of the, like a different, like a parts of the world, where, like a different other species of animals, they have gone extinct, right? Even another example of, like these cheetahs, they used to be, abundantly available in, Indian subcontinent, but during, like a British rule, they were hunted so much, by like British and other like European like rulers, invaders of that time, that this species also got extinct. And recently government of India has tried like bringing them back by getting a few from like a African, like a continent, so that their population, if still it flourishes, start like rising in our subcontinent, right? So those are the like some examples, but there are many other unknown species running in thousands, which have gone extinct, because of like a deliberate or even indeliberate, like a impacts of human activities, right? So it upsets the balance of nature and makes ecosystem more fragile and less resistant to disruptions. A recent UN report on biodiversity found that around 1 million animal and plant species are now threatened with extinction, many within decades more than ever before in human history. So 1 million. So now you have the number, you know. In just few decades, 1 million, that means 10 lakh, you know, species of plants and animals, and insects and all combined, are going to get, like a extinct. How does it affect our health? Increased demand for animal protein, a rise in intense and unsustainable farming, increased use and exploitation of wildlife, and the climate crisis are all driving the increased emergence of zoonotic diseases transmitted from wildlife to people, like COVID-19. Yeah, so it is kind of like I said, that this COVID-19 virus actually came from like a wild animals, some species, and got mingled with the humans, and then from humans it spread to the whole world, and almost every country like got it, and there is a huge like a loss of life, health, and like economy everywhere, right? So the problem mentioned over here is the since there is a loss of like a forest and biodiversity, now human society is directly exposed to those wildlife like a forms with which we have not been like a conventionally exposed or in direct touch, right? So this may open another like a round of like a unknown sort of diseases, we are not even aware of what kind of like a viruses and bacteria and other like a microbes are like harboring in those like a wildlife animals and different plant species. If it starts like happening, it may be like a new swath of like invasion for the entire like a humanity and other life forms, right? So again, direct impact is because of like a loss of the forest and loss of biodiversity. Every year some 2 million people, mostly in low and middle income countries, die from neglected zoonotic diseases. This is the number, 2 million low and middle income countries. The same outbreaks can cause severe illness, deaths, and productivity losses among livestock populations in the developing world, a major problem that keeps hundreds of millions of small scale farmers in severe poverty. In the last 2 decades alone, zoonotic diseases have caused economic losses of more than 100 billion US dollars, not including the cost of COVID-19 pandemic, which is expected to reach 9 trillion US dollars over the next few years. That's a humongous, like a figure, we are looking at, in the form of damages, caused by, like a such, like a zoonotic diseases, right? So this is the extent, we are talking about. What can be done about this? Some things can we do to help include recycling, eating a locally based diet that is sustainably sourced, and consuming only what we need. We must be respectful toward wildlife and only take part in ecotourism opportunities that are responsibly and ethically run in order to prevent wildlife disturbances. Well managed protected areas support healthy ecosystems, which in turn keep people healthy. It is therefore critical to secure the environment of the local communities in the developing and management of these protected areas. So protection of these areas is the essential, like and bottom line, like a thing for maintaining, this, like all of these things, whether the loss of biodiversity, the loss of like a different, like a species, degradation of land, desertification, and all of those things, right? For more details, refer here. So what do we see as like goals and targets in this? Protect, restore, and promote sustainable use of terrestrial ecosystems. sustainably manage forests, combat desertification, and halt and reverse land degradation, and halt biodiversity loss. The points which we saw earlier. Inside that, by 2020, promote the implementation of sustainable management of all type of forests. 2030, ensure the conservation of mountain ecosystems, including their biodiversity. By 2020, ensure the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use of terrestrial and inland freshwater ecosystems. Okay, these. Reduce the degradation of natural habitat. Take urgent action to end poaching and trafficking of protected species. Yeah, you may be aware, there are, like a number of instances, from, like every, like a country, that wild animals are hunted, for, some, weird, unique kind of purposes, whether for, like a cosmetics, whether for, like a luxury related things, whether for, like some pre-assumed, maybe ill-assumed, like a medicinal, like a properties and things like that. Okay, which has actually driven those species, to the extinction. Many of them have already, gone extinct, and many of them are on the verge of extinction because of, like this kind of exploitation. So, what is a weird kind of, like a taste, like, some people, like have in the society, that they are not even care about, whether the whole, like of that species is going to get, like extinct. Okay, so this is the very irresponsible, like a way of, like a handling things, or like having some, like a weird kind of like a taste of, like a things, and etc. Right. So controlling those kind of things is like a major challenge, because unless and until, like the people's habit actually change, okay, in some way or the other, they will keep on driving, because in many of these cases, they are ready to pay, like a whatever, like a dollars are needed, for sourcing these things, which in turn becomes, the biggest driver, to, like such conditions. Promote fair and equitable sharing of the benefits, arising from the utilization of genetic, resources. By 2020, introduce measures to prevent the introduction and reduce the impact of alien species. Integrate ecosystem and biodiversity value in national and local planning. So at all levels, not just at national level, at local level also, this must be, considered and brought into the books for greater control. By 2030, combat desertification and restore degraded land and soil. So you see, this is the, like a desert, it's rising, and yeah, there is a full stop, like being proposed over here. Financial resources to conserve and sustainably use ecosystem and biodiversity, sustainable forest management, combat poaching, and trafficking of protected species.